My name is Sarah Curran, and I am the program manager for the Maine Forest Economy Growth Initiative. And what I want to do today is explain to you a little bit about what that group is and what we're trying to achieve, and also give you an update on the various subcommittees and where they're at and what they're working on. So the vision and roadmap for Maine's forest sector, I want to emphasize three things today. One is that this is an industry-led collaborative process. So the subcommittees are chaired by industry members. We have more than 35 industry participants on the various subcommittees right now, and so that is really where the momentum and energy is coming from, is within the forest products industry, and I think that's really exciting. The purpose is to encourage private investment in Maine's forest products sector, and the way we want to do that is by identifying the opportunities that we need to take advantage of, and by identifying the challenges that we need to address, and then being very specific about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it to move those things forward. So why are we doing this? This is a story that is very familiar to all of you. We've had some pretty significant market changes in the last few years. We've had 6 pulp and paper mills close, we've had the periodic idling of biomass facilities, and we've lost 50% of the softwood pulp market. At the same time, this is an $8.5 billion industry with more than 33,500 jobs. So it's a big deal in Maine. The report that came out last year from the Maine Forest Products Council said that 1 out of every $20 of the state GDP and 1 out of every 24 jobs in the state is related to this sector. So this is big and important here, and we need to figure out how to sustain it and grow it. And we have some assets and advantages that we need to be taking advantage of. I've learned a few things. I'm new to the forest products industry. This is all a big learning curve for me. But what I've heard is that we are within a day drive of really big markets, and that's a really big asset for us. Also, we have certified forest land, and that is really important to a lot of consumers, the sustainability aspect. And then finally, the fact that our lands are privately owned. Steve Schley and I have both heard on various trips when people ask, they are very excited that they can deal with a handful of people and secure a lot of supply of wood when they're looking at business opportunities in Maine. So we have these assets, we have companies that are growing and investing and making new products. We also have some challenges. I hear about workforce issues and tax issues and energy issues. So we have all of this kind of swirling around in the context. We have things that we could be taking advantage of. We have challenges that need to be addressed. And so the purpose of this project is really to get that all out in the open and talk as an industry about what we want to do to address those things. Other regions have done this. They have brought everybody together and said, all right, where do we want to go and how are we going to get there? And that really is the purpose of this project, is to say, okay, these are the challenges that we need to meet, and this is how we're going to do it. These are the opportunities that we want to take advantage of, and this is how we're going to do it. And to get us to a place where we have opportunities for new and expanded forest products businesses, where we have a more diversified forest products economy, where we have high value exports, and increased jobs and wages. As Donna Cassesi is always reminding me, it is about rural Maine jobs. Industry-led, but with a lot of partners. And I just wanted to take a minute to highlight the partners that are participating here. As I said on the committees, and I'll show you a very messy slide in a moment where you'll see all the people who are participating in the various subcommittees. But we have more than 35 industry members donating their time, participating in these subcommittee meetings. We have support from several industry associations, the Forest Products Council, the Maine Woodland Owners, the Professional Logging Contractors, Bio-Based Maine, and the Maine Development Foundation, which is where Yellow and I are. We have partners, the University of Maine, the Maine Technology Institute, MITC, Maine and Company. We have enormous support from the Maine Congressional Delegation, which has been fantastic. And we have funding from the USDA and the Maine Technology Institute to support this work. So it's a really collaborative process with a lot of key players at the table. We also have this is part of a larger effort. So we have a focus on the industry roadmap, and at the same time, we have folks at the table who are looking at the community perspective. So I just wanted to highlight that the industry piece is part of a bigger picture that looks at not only where the industry goes, but how we have healthy Maine communities. So when we pulled together the Maine Forest Economy Growth Initiative, It includes partners that are from industry, it includes the university, it also includes community stakeholders. So we have communities where facilities are located, communities where facilities have closed, and we want to work with them as well to be thinking about how we have healthy Maine communities where people can live, work, and play. So this is where I wanted to invite Yellow to speak a little bit because the Maine Development Foundation is a new partner in this, and I wanted to have him just talk a little bit about the sort of unique collaboration that has come about as part of this and our role in all of this work.
Maine Development Foundation is a public-private partnership that's been around for almost 40 years. You may know us best by our Measures of Growth report that we've been putting out almost 20 years, which is kind of the economy-wide version of the work that you guys put out in terms of the forest economy and its health and its trend line. Or you may know us from our Leadership Maine program or our bus tour for state legislators in the Policy Leaders Academy. A lot of you have helped us organize those over the years, hosted those for us over the years. So essentially, we know nothing about forest products, but I think that's part of the magic of being part of this partnership with the council and with the other industry players. Everyone has leaned into this project enormously and with great vigor, and having now three industry trade associations staying at the table for over a year, working in the same harness around this, and then trying to engage the research resources in the state, the nonprofit resources in the state, and an unconventional cast of characters, and saying, you know, this isn't just about the industry for the industry. I think oftentimes the greatest value that MDF brings to an important discussion in the state around economic policy has been precisely that we don't draw a paycheck for a living from the industries that, and opportunities that we might advocate for. And so sometimes we're saying the same thing that have been said by others, or sometimes that have been said for a long time, but either are dismissed because of the perceived self-interest of who's saying it, or aren't reaching the right audience. So, you know, as we think about what we can do, it's to tell this story about an incredibly exciting sector. And I was sitting here this morning thinking, how do you explode the mentality of the two Maines around this and have opinion leaders and investors and capitalists in Greater Portland who are just as excited about leveraging the 17 million acres of timberland in Maine with an innovative focus, and to help us develop that forward-looking value chain that our friend from Finland just talked about. We get excited about a lot of other much smaller opportunities in the state that are starting from a much lower baseline, sometimes even zero, compared to this industry. So I think it's that outside perspective of a group where, you know, I'm out there probably doing 50 speaking engagements a year, almost all of them south of Route 2. We have 1,100 alumni of our leadership program, the vast majority of them south of Route 2, right? And part of the dilemma is we all heard all this exciting stuff all day, but a lot of what we heard, albeit in a slightly less technical frame, other Mainers who aren't in this industry and don't even necessarily live in the geographies that we work in, how could they get excited about some of these opportunities and stories we've heard? So I think in a nutshell, that's MDF's role, is to bring those fresh eyes to this, be neutral ground for both some of the subsectors of the industry and for non-industry participants that care about Maine deeply in this arena, and to help flip that narrative and reach different audiences with our conclusions, especially as we get the work done about the common direction. I think the last piece that's a common challenge is, you know, we need to have a great strategy, but because we're small and we have limited resources, then we have to persist in it for years and years across electoral cycles with whatever that strategy is. So again, maybe the infrastructure and the credibility and the 40-year track record of MDF, how can we partner with you to bring that staying power to whatever we come up with?
You know, we have these shared goals between and across industry and community partners, and those goals are around sustaining the existing forest products businesses. The base of everything is sort of the traditional products and how you build off of that. And the easiest jobs to keep are the ones that you have. It's new jobs that are harder to recruit, but also attracting capital investments into new businesses, and then supporting the revitalization of Maine's rural communities. So we identified these as shared goals by university, community, and industry partners, and that's what we've been working to. And then For the industry roadmaps project in particular, we have a number of different subcommittees that have formed around various tasks. And so what I want to do is just kind of give you a brief update on what each of those has been doing. We have a global market assessment group. We have that's working to, both to look at where the new markets are and benchmarking Maine relative to other countries and regions. We're looking at a sort of strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis of the various subsectors. We're looking at forest modeling and the availability of fiber. Transportation, wood is moving in ways that it didn't used to, and that has implications for investments in transportation infrastructure. Combined heat and power, as we heard about this morning, what are the opportunities there? And then emerging technologies, those kind of new products. And so the idea is to look at each of those individually and then pull it together into a plan that says this is how we're going to move forward, and a marketing plan that we can say to the rest of the world, here's what we have, come take advantage of it. So that's the kind of basic structure for the roadmap project. It's modeled after the budworm effort, Patrick has described to me, that brought industry partners together to put together a plan for how to deal with the spruce budworm outbreak. And it's led by, this is the messy chart that I wanted just to show you briefly. There's an executive committee that's up in the top that's sort of responsible for keeping an eye on all of these subcommittees and then for pulling it all together in the end. And the reason that I wanted to show you this chart, as confusing as it is to just demonstrate the multifaceted and extensive participation that we have on all of these committees. So we have a lot of people working really hard in each of these sectors. So we have all of these committees now up and running, and I'm going to just walk through each of them briefly. The Global Market and Benchmarking Committee is really looking at conducting a global market analysis. You know, what products are growing globally, and what is Maine well positioned to take advantage of. We just issued an RFP on Friday, actually, just a few days ago, to have a global consultant help us with this task, somebody who is sort of familiar with what's happening, not just in North America, but globally, where things are growing and where we can plug in. And so we're looking forward to hiring a consultant to work on that effort. And the idea is that we'd be hoping to have results back from that study in early next year. We also have a wood fiber availability committee, and that group is tasked with looking at sort of what's available right now, and that's an immediate, more short-term deliverable, but then also longer range, how does that look in 10 years, 20 years under different market scenarios? And so how do we know long-term what our fiber availability is going to be so that we can plan for the kinds of activities that we can do to take advantage of that availability? Peter, do you want to add anything to what that group is working on?
We put out an RFP for the first phase, which is the shorter term one, and we awarded it. Sewell Company's going to do it, so we're just waiting on funding, and we'll get to work on it.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a transportation committee that is working on 3 different tasks. As I mentioned, the wood is moving as you're all aware, it's moving in different ways than it did before the closure of those facilities. And so they're looking at doing first a survey of industry, and so they want to ask people, what are the most important roads to you, and what is their condition? Maine DOT has asked us to provide that information. They have said they would love to hear from the forest products industry about where they need to make improvements, and so we have agreed that we would be happy to provide that information. So that group is working on a survey that'll be going out in the next couple of weeks, so many of you will see that. And then also looking at a wood flow analysis, if we can better understand how wood is moving at a high level across the state, we can think about transportation efficiencies that might be able to be gained. And then again, that benchmarking component, so looking at taxes and weights and axles and those kinds of things to understand, are there places where we're not competitive, where if we made some policy changes, that could make a big difference in terms of savings and efficiency for private industry. And Maine DOT, so the survey will be this fall, and then we'll try and do that annually. MDOT does a 3-year plan every year, and if we can, any input we provide into that can only be helpful to us. And then the other 2 analyses will be winter and going into the spring of next year. There's a wood energy committee. There are a number of different strategies being proposed for how to do more wood energy and more modern thermal heat in Maine, and this group said they'd like to do a cost-benefit analysis of what some of those strategies, what would be the benefits to industry, what would be the cost to ratepayers, so that we can make an informed decision in terms of what we want to pick for strategic direction. So that group is looking at all of those kinds of options in terms of how to do more CHP and how to do more modern thermal heat. And again, looking at starting this fall, getting a scope of work together and trying to get some answers starting in the spring. There's an emerging technologies committee, and this is, talking about the bioplastics and the cellulosic sugars and the new building materials, and how do we know which of those opportunities is well suited for Maine? How do we attract them and get them here? And that group right now is focused on how do you do a vetting process so that we know which ones make sense and that we don't lose opportunities. When people come to Maine and they say, I'd love to do this here, how do we make sure that we're all talking to each other and talking to them and putting our best foot forward? Steve, do you want to add anything to the Emerging Technologies Committee?
The thing on the emerging technologies is we are engaged in a very active effort of visiting all these potential technologies, research systems. They're located all over the country and all over the world. We've been to Amsterdam, we've been to Montreal, I'm headed to Atlanta with a couple of other people on Wednesday of this week. There's a facility we need to go see. Some people are expressing interest from upstate New York. Mm-hmm. One of the things that within the framework of the design of this whole process, the emergency technologies was expected to be a phase 2 follow-up effort, but there's so much interest in advancing some of these opportunities that we're having to move it now. It wasn't supposed to come for about another year. So Sarah's absolutely right. We need to make sure we're marshaling resources, we're providing consistent messages, that we are effectively vetting all of these different potentials against a similar set of standards. It's going to be a very interesting effort.
So, I think Steve makes a good point, which is this is happening in real time. So in an ideal process, you're getting all of these results from each of these committees, and then you're starting to integrate it. But in reality, all of these committees have deliverables that are useful and valuable to us right now. And so how do we get that information and share it and get it out there for each of those committees, while at the same time we're thinking long-term and strategically and pulling it together into that, how do we capture those opportunities, how do we address those challenges for the long term? So that's the other big important role of the executive committee, is that big picture and pulling all of this together. And I think that'll probably be next spring when we'll start to have results from all of these committees, and that executive committee will be responsible for saying, okay, this is all the information we have, this is where we're going with it. But as Steve said, this is happening real time, and so we're hoping to make all of this information available and useful to you as it comes out. I do want to just mention briefly the things that are happening on the community side. That group, we're working with the 6 communities who've lost facilities over the last couple of years, and working with them to think about both one, mill site redevelopment, how do we help them get new industrial activity onto those sites while they are still assets and not liabilities, and then also economic diversification both within forest products industry and around it as well. So working with community leaders and economic development leaders in those 6 towns to think about how to build some resiliency into their local and regional economies. And we were successful getting some legislation passed this past spring around mill site redevelopment, creating a grant program at MRDA to give out some infrastructure planning grants and business planning grants and things like that to towns and mill site owners to provide some financial resources for them in their planning for mill site redevelopment. And that passed through both houses and with the governor's signature. So that was pretty remarkable this past session. So it's an industry-led process. The purpose is to encourage private investment, and the way we're going to do that is to identify the opportunities and the challenges and exactly what and how we're going to do something about it. So that was what I wanted to share with you today. Patrick and Steve, have I missed anything? Do you want to add anything?
I would like to add one thing. The effort, as Sarah said, one of the things that occasionally we're getting criticized about is whether or not this is an industry effort or if this is somehow being foisted upon us and we don't really want anything to do with it. The reality is it is being industry-led. We are recognizing regional differences within the state of Maine. Some of us get frustrated when legislators think about things. Every acre is the same, right? Every section of the state is the same. We should treat any potential wood sector pursuit opportunity in Falmouth the same as we should in Ashland. We all know that the realities are very, very different than that. And so as we look at transportation sector analysis, as we look at emerging technologies, we are, whatever these, as we look at volumetric and species differences by mega region in the state, we're going to make sure that we're coordinating and implementing the best solutions for the best local regions in concert with what the local communities want. It's very exciting, I think, as a part of this effort to see, in cooperation with the partners that Sarah had up on one of those slides up there, that folks like represented by Bio-Based Maine, Charlotte Mesa's group, she is putting out RFPs on behalf of member companies of this organization who are looking to advance new opportunities at facilities that they have where they see opportunity for additional utilization. The Re-Energy folks and the Ashland and the Northern Maine complex, Northern Maine Regional Development Commission, the Ashland Industrial Park, are all releasing RFPs to try and attract business that will be specific to them. We're going to do everything that we can to support that entire variety of opportunities. So don't think that we're going to create a one-size-fits-all shoe here that everybody has to wear. That's not what we're after. We want to make things work for the local communities, for the local industries, and for the local forest supply.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you. It's really an honor to be working with such a great group of people on this project, and I think it's a really big opportunity. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and happy to be here. Yeah, Don.
Thank you. Sarah, at the risk of being my usually blunt self, that some of you may think I am, has the group ever considered setting a target for what it wants to achieve? I mean, I look at what was presented to us from Finland, from the gentleman here, and they set up a reasonable target that they were going to double the size of their industry within a specified amount of time, and they were going to do it with non-conventional forest-based economic systems. And, you know, you're never going to know if you're going to get there unless you set a target. Yeah. And I'm just begging the question. I mean, this effort is great, but you should have a target that drives you to actions, that you're going to actually go out there and perform, identify who, what, when, and where, and get you there. And it's going to be in multiple layers, as Steve has talked about. It's going to be regional, but without absent a target, there's going to be another process with no results. That's my experience.
I think you're 100% spot on. I mean, I think you're a little bit ahead of us in terms of where we are right now. So what we have right now is we have all of these groups trying to get the lay of the land in terms of what are the global markets, what's the wood fiber availability, and getting that information. And then that is exactly the next stage, is where do you want to go as specifically as possible, and how do we get there, and who does what in what timeline. I mean, the implementation aspect of this is critical. I don't think anybody's interested in having a plan that sits on a shelf.
But the target should be global enough so everybody identifies with it.
Yep.
And there will be subsets that will fit into that overall strategy.
Yep.
But I just encourage you to really think that one through.
No, I think that you're absolutely right. Do you want to add anything to that? Okay. Yeah.
So where are you right now in your schedule of work? Just
So right now, all of those committees are identifying their scope of work. So we're just getting started. We had to stagger the committees. You know, you can only you convene one group and get them going, and you convene the next group and get them going. So the Wood Fiber Availability Committee has done their first scope of work, put out their RFP, selected their phase 1 consultant. they're ready to go. Global market RFP just went out on Friday, so they'll be reviewing consultants and selecting them. The other committees are still kind of saying, okay, we want to make sure we learn more about this, we want to make sure we learn more about this, and kind of getting real specific about what they want to focus on over the coming months. So I'd say we're at the very beginning in terms of the work being done.
Is there any midterm presentation that will come out, such just to see where you are, just to share what you've been doing?
That one of the things we talked about was not wanting to do that too early when we didn't have anything to share with you. So we're hoping to do something later in the fall or in the winter when we have some results from some of these studies where we can say, here's what we're finding, what do you think? So there will definitely be some opportunities.